Welcome. You found your way back to a quiet place, a space where time stretches out softly, and history is told not to excite but to calm, not to rush but to lull. You're not here to study. You're not here to remember every detail. You're simply here to listen and to let your thoughts drift. If the story helps you relax, please like this video, subscribe for more calming history, and let us know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Tonight our journey begins far from the lands of cities and stone. We leave behind the forests and farms of settled people. We ride into a different world, one of wide skies and wandering lives, a place where movement is survival, where the wind is the loudest voice, and where history was made not from behind walls, but beneath the sky. We are headed to the Mongolian steppe, a landscape of constant motion, a place of dry grasses that ripple like water, herds that stretch beyond the eye's reach, and the steady beat of hooves that once carried a people across half the known world. The Mongols are remembered for their empire, for their swift conquests, their fearsome warriors, their legendary leader Genghis Khan. But before the empire, there was only the land, and the struggle to live on it. Tonight we begin not with glory, but with survival, with a look at the ordinary, the daily, grueling, beautifully harsh life of those who lived in a Mongol horse camp. From there, we'll meet the man who rose from rejection and wilderness to rule the greatest land empire the world has ever known. Then we'll drift east and west along the forgotten roads his armies carved, and explore the lost cities of the Silk Road. And finally, we'll sit in the golden tents of the elite, and see how prestige was built not with marble and gold, but with discipline, kinship, and the constant thrum of readiness. This is not a history of kings and battles alone. It's the story of cold mornings, of fermented milk and burning thighs, of riding not for adventure, but because you must. Let the wind carry us now. Let your thoughts settle like snow, and let the journey begin. Imagine yourself, standing alone beneath an enormous sky. No trees, no walls, just grass and wind. You're in the heart of the Mongolian steppe, a land that rolls gently but endlessly in every direction. It is morning, early morning. The kind of morning that comes with no alarm, no rush, only cold. A cold that finds its way under every layer, that whispers in your ears and nestles in your joints. You're wrapped in furs, but they barely hold it back. Your shelter? A gur, a circular felt tent you share with family, tools, and maybe a few animals. There's no insulation beyond thick wool. The smoke hole is open, and the air smells faintly of damp ashes and horse sweat. You don't get to stretch or take your time waking up. The fire needs rekindling, the animals need tending, and the wind is already rising. You step outside. It's barely dawn, but already the camp is stirring. The horizon is washed in pale light. You hear low voices, the clinking of harnesses, the rustle of saddlecloths, the soft grunt of a restless yak. Your family owns a few horses, maybe 5 or 6 if you're lucky. One is old and limping. Another is young and skittish, but they are everything. They are transportation, livelihood, heat, and food source. They are status. You begin your day by checking their hooves, cracking ice off water buckets, rubbing them down to warm their muscles before a long ride. Breakfast isn't warm, it's practical. A few bites of dried meat, a sip of arag, the fermented milk of a mare. It's sour, a little fizzy, but it wakes you up at least. And then the saddle, always the saddle. Every Mongol from childhood learns to ride. Not for fun or leisure, but because you cannot survive without it. Your saddle is wooden, high-backed, and firm. Your legs ache as you mount. You keep your balance through instinct and repetition. Your hands are free to guide, to hold a bow, or to brace yourself against the wind. The ride begins. Where are you going? That depends on the day. Perhaps you're driving a herd toward better pasture. Perhaps you're joining a training ride with your unit. Perhaps you're delivering a message, part of the YAM, the Mongol postal system, which relied on swift, unbroken couriers changing horses every 20-30 miles. There is no paved road, no clear path, only memory and the compass of the sun. You might travel for hours without a tree in sight, and the only landmarks are low hills or oddly shaped rocks. You stop rarely. You eat on the saddle. More dried meat, maybe cheese made from goat's milk. You drink what you carry, or snow if there is snow, or sometimes nothing. If a storm comes, you do not wait it out. You lean forward, shield your face, keep moving. To stop is to freeze. By afternoon, the sun may warm the land just enough to melt the top layer of soil, creating a slick, muddy surface that clings to hooves and boots alike. You may dismount often, to let the horses rest, to walk beside them, to scout the terrain. And then, night. Night is colder, always colder. You return to camp as the sky deepens into a soft purple.
The fire has been restarted.
You hang strips of meat to dry. You brush your animals one last time. The horses are brought close to the yurts, hobbled so they don't wander. You keep them near because the wolves come at night. You listen closely, not just for the howl but for the sudden stillness that often comes before. Dinner is meager, boiled grains if available, dried curds and always more arag. You're tired but alert, always alert, because you're not alone. Other families, other warriors, other animals, oh mom, all share this camp. And the land is not yours. It is never really anyone's. The Mongol way is to move, to shift, to follow the seasons. Finally, you sleep on mats, or woolen blankets if you're fortunate. The ground is hard. The wind is louder than you expected, and just outside the thin flap of your yurt, your horses breathe quietly. Their warmth is comfort, their presence survival. This is your life, not for a day but for years. For generations, no walls, no clocks, only the rhythm of the wind, the hoof, the fire, and the cold. You would not last a day here. And yet, the Mongols did. Every day for centuries, they did not merely survive, they thrived. And what they built, from this humble, restless life, would echo across continents. Let us follow that echo now, into the heart of its most unlikely architect. The ruthless genius of Genghis Khan. Now that we've wandered the campfires and cold winds of daily Mongol life, let us move deeper into the folds of history, into the life of the man who shaped that world with vision, violence, and relentless will. Imagine the wind again, endless shifting, carrying stories over the grasslands like seeds. In the year 1162, or perhaps 1167 for records blur in the haze of time, a boy was born along the banks of the Onan River, in what is now northeastern Mongolia. He was not born into glory. He was not born into empire. His name was Temujin, and his earliest memories were of hardship. His father was a tribal chief of moderate standing, a man named Yesugei. But even this small comfort was short-lived. When Temujin was still a boy, his father was poisoned by rival Tatars. What followed was not a smooth inheritance, but abandonment. The tribe that had once followed his father turned their backs on his widow and children. Temujin, his mother Hulin, and his siblings were left to survive alone, cast out into the wilderness with no protection, no allies, and no power. And survive they did. They ate roots. They trapped small game. They endured the humiliation of scavenging from the nests of wild birds. Imagine yourself again, not in a yurt now, but crouched in cold grass, scraping for eggs, scanning the horizon for danger, both man and beast. Temujin learned early that loyalty was fragile, and that survival depended on sharp judgment and even sharper instincts. As he grew, he began to gather followers, not through wealth, but through charisma, cunning, and often shared desperation. He treated his companions with an unusual degree of equality for the time, rewarding merit over birth and demanding discipline. He also knew betrayal well. He would face it again and again. Once he was captured by a rival clan and held in a wooden yoke, a humiliating punishment meant to break him. But he escaped. He always escaped. Slowly, painstakingly, Temujin began to unite the fractured tribes of the Mongolian plateau. These were not peaceful alliances. Battles were fought, blood was spilled. But unlike many warlords of his era, Temujin offered more than conquest. He offered structure, order, to a land long shaped by chaos. He implemented a system of strict military organization, dividing his forces into groups of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000. Loyalty to tribe was replaced with loyalty to unit, and above all to him. He abolished inherited aristocracy, promoted men from humble origins, and ensured that those who followed him received spoils, and those who betrayed him faced merciless consequence. In 1206, after decades of struggle, a great assembly of Mongol nobles declared him Genghis Khan, universal ruler. But it was not a coronation in golden halls. There were no velvet robes, and a people hardened by it. From that moment on, Genghis Khan would change the world. He led campaigns into the north of China, the Khwarezmian Empire, Persia, and beyond. His warriors, mounted and tireless, could travel over 100 miles in a single day, communicating with signals, drums, and fire. He pioneered psychological warfare, spreading fear ahead of his army so effectively that some cities surrendered without a fight. But for all his brutality, and it was significant, Genghis Khan also created bridges between civilizations. He promoted religious tolerance, employed scholars, engineers, and artisans from across his conquered territories. He established laws that protected trade routes and messengers, the Yam system, stretching from Korea to the Caspian Sea. And through it all, he never built a permanent palace. He never wore a golden crown. He ruled from a saddle and slept in a yurt. By the time of his death, in 1227, under circumstances still debated, the Mongol Empire was the largest contiguous land empire in history. And yet his body was hidden, his tomb never found, his grave swallowed by the steppe as if the earth itself wished to keep his secret. Today his legacy is vast, both praised and feared. A man forged by betrayal, defined by resilience, and remembered by the wind. Let the fire burn down now. Let the hoofbeats fade. As we leave behind the man and step toward the path his empire opened, in the dust behind the armies, in the silence of empty marketplaces and shuttered temples, there remain footprints. Let's follow them. Imagine yourself as a child on the steppe. You are no more than 4 years old, and already the world expects something of you. There are no schools here, no playgrounds, no written tests. Your classroom is the camp. Your teachers, your parents, your older siblings, and the land itself. You wake in the yurt, your breath visible in the morning air. You share the space with your brothers and sisters, your grandmother, your goats, and sometimes your horse. There are no toys, only tools. Small bows, worn ropes, a skin pouch you are slowly learning to tie. By age 3 or 4, your feet are expected to rest in stirrups, not for play, but because riding is life. A child who cannot ride is a burden. A child who can, even barely, is already useful. You begin on a lambskin saddle, strapped tight to a short pony. Your legs don't reach far. Your grip is unsteady. But your parents do not coddle. They encourage, they demonstrate, and they expect. By 5 or 6, you are herding small animals. You lead goats and sheep away from camp, watching the sky for signs of storms, scanning the grass for foxes or wolves. You learn to read the world the way others might read a book. You notice how the wind changes before rain. You learn which way the smoke drifts in different seasons. You remember which slope still hides snow in spring, where water pools when the rest of the land is dry. At 7, your bow is no longer a toy. You are not expected to kill, but you are expected to aim, to strike a moving target from the saddle, or at least try. You practice by shooting at padded sacks, stuffed leather targets, or even birds in flight. The goal is not only precision, but rhythm. You must fire while galloping, guiding the horse with your knees, drawing the bow with smooth, continuous motion. No drama, no flair, just calm repetition. Some children are faster learners. Some fall. Some cry, but no one is excused. You do not carry a name like warrior or soldier, not yet. You are simply a child of the steppe, and the steppe does not pause for childhood. You help grind millet into flour. You learn to stitch your own mittens from sheepskin. You help your mother boil water in a pot, blackened from dozens of fires. If you are a girl, you may also ride and shoot, just as the boys do. Your role is not limited by gender, but by the strength of your will. By 8 or 9, your hands are already rough. You know how to braid rawhide. You know how to gather dung for the fire without flinching. You know the difference between a healthy horse and one that will not survive the winter. Imagine again, riding beside your older brother. He says little, but watches you. You've been trusted to help drive a small herd toward a distant pasture. You do not talk, you ride. You look to the horizon, you listen for wolves. At camp, you are watched, not just by your family, but by your unit commander if your clan is already part of a military band. Boys especially are grouped and trained together. A shared childhood that becomes a lifelong bond. You sleep light, you wake when told. You are taught never to beg, never to show hunger. You eat what you are given. You share without being asked. Discipline is not shouted, it is shown. If a child breaks a tool, they mend it. If they fall behind, they catch up. Praise is rare, but respect once earned is lasting. Some children sing, not loudly, but in quiet voices around the fire. They learn the old songs of ancestors, the tales of battles long past. The rhythm of those songs, slow, steady, mournful, becomes the rhythm of their hearts. And at night, when you lay down in the felt-lined yurt beside your cousins, your mother, and the heavy hide blankets that still smell of sheep, you fall asleep listening to the sound of horses breathing. You feel the fire's heat against your back. And you dream not of games or play, but of riding further, shooting straighter, becoming stronger. You are a child of the steppe. There is no rank too low and no dream too high. One day you may ride under the banner of the great Khan, but first you must ride alone into the wind. Now imagine yourself once more, on horseback. The saddle creaks beneath you. The reins are coarse in your fingers, and far ahead, the line of the enemy is just a shape against the earth. You are not armored, you do not carry a shield. There is no sword at your side. What you have is your horse, your bow, your arrows, and the confidence of every rider around you, spread across the plain like a ripple of grass in motion. This is Mongol warfare, and it is not like the battles you've heard of before. There is no charge of knights, no clash of shields, no shouting commanders in gilded helmets. The Mongols fight, like wind, with calm, with rhythm, and with a memory deeper than steel, training the body, taming the mind from childhood. Mongols are trained not to conquer and but to ride, to move in unison with their horse, to fire from the saddle, to make decisions at a gallop. By the time they are ready for war, they do not need practice. They need only a target. Their army is not a crowd of conscripts. It is an instrument, tuned, disciplined, and flexible. Every warrior is part of a decimal system. Groups of 10 men called Arban, 100 men, a Zun, 1,000, a Mingan, and the mighty Tumen, 10,000 riders moving as one. Orders are given by signal, a raised arm, a fluttering banner, a call echoed across the line. The weapons of a Mongol horseman. Your main weapon is not a spear or sword, but a composite bow. Made from layers of wood, horn, and sinew, it's small enough to use from horseback, but powerful enough to pierce armor at 200 meters. You carry dozens of arrows, some for distance, some barbed for armor, some whistling to frighten horses. You wear a light coat of leather or silk, not to protect from blades, but to remain mobile. Heavy armor is useless if you can't turn, shoot, or flee. At your side, a curved saber, sometimes a lance, occasionally a lasso. But the real weapon is discipline. Not strength, not size, but total commitment to the command. Tactics from the wind. The Mongols rarely attack head-on. Instead, they circle, they ride to the sides. They feign retreat. Again and again, they would lure enemies into chasing them, only to turn suddenly from full gallop and unleash a volley of arrows into the chaos. Their enemies, trained for direct combat, would break ranks. They would become scattered, exposed, and then the Mongols would strike, not from the front but from every direction at once. They used false retreats, often riding for days with an army in pursuit, only to lead them into an ambush, where hidden riders waited behind hills or in dry riverbeds. They would divide their forces into wings, one attacking, the other flanking, the third lying in wait. They would fight at dawn, at dusk, under stars, or not at all, waiting for the exact moment when morale dipped or supplies ran low. And when they did charge, it was never spontaneous. It was a signal, a decision made in silence. Thousands of hooves would thunder across the earth, but the archers would hold fire until the perfect range, and then a black rain of arrows. Not in bursts, but in waves, rhythmic, steady, relentless, siege without stone. And when they reached cities, places with high walls and thick gates, they adapted again. The Mongols were not engineers at first, but they learned quickly. They brought Chinese, Persian, and Arab siege masters into their service. They built catapults, battering rams, flaming arrows, and even gunpowder bombs. They dug trenches, cut off water supplies, used psychological warfare, sometimes releasing prisoners to spread terror before an attack. And if a city resisted too long, the lesson was made clear. Some surrendered quickly after hearing stories and of how those who refused were erased. But the Mongols didn't seek destruction for its own sake. Once a city submitted, it was often left intact. Merchants were protected, religions tolerated, rulers sometimes reappointed if loyal. They didn't just conquer, they absorbed. The quiet aftermath. When the battle ended, there was no celebration, no parades, no fanfare. The army moved on. The camp packed up, the horses fed. The silence returned. For the Mongols, victory was not glory. It was survival, a task completed. A road cleared, their soldiers didn't retire. They rode on, sometimes east, sometimes west. Their saddles worn smooth, their arrows restocked, their minds clear. And now, let the wind settle again. Let the dust of battle drift back into the grass. Let the hooves fade into distance. You felt the rhythm of the army, the quiet unity of rider and horse, the patience of a people who fought not with noise, but with the logic of the land itself. And as the firelight returns to your thoughts, we'll turn next to a different kind of movement, not the motion of war, but the constant migration of entire lives, a nation that moved as one, not just armies, but families, livestock, memories. Imagine a life without walls, no home address, no roads or fences, just grass stretching in all directions and a round felt tent you can build, fold, and carry. This was the Mongol way, a nation on the move, an empire that traveled with the seasons and survived through motion. Why they moved the steppe cannot be tamed. Grass must regrow, wells dry out. The cold bites deeper if you stay too long. So they moved south in winter, north in summer. They followed the rhythm of the land, and with each season their entire world shifted, herds, families, homes, taking the world with them. When it was time to move, the whole camp acted. Tents, called gersmes, were collapsed and bundled. Poles were tied. Felt was rolled. Tools packed. Oxen pulled carts, camels bore supplies. Children helped too, learning by doing. In hours, a home became a caravan. The caravan camp. Though mobile, the Mongol camp had order. The Khan's tent stood in the center. To the right, commanders, to the left, kin and advisors. Beyond, herders, smiths, servants, even on the move, their society was mapped. Not in stone, but in space. Each time they stopped, the same pattern reformed. Every jur in its place. In daily life they lived light. No ovens, few belongings. Their meals came from animals, meat boiled or dried. Milk turned into cheese, butter, or arag. Grain, when traded, made into porridge. They burned dried dung for fuel, a steady, smokeless fire. They worked constantly, milking, sewing, riding, fixing. Life was motion. Life was rhythm, memory and movement. The Mongols didn't write much. They remembered through places. This is where our mare foaled in a snowstorm. That ridge, where wolves came in spring. Each stop told a story. They didn't leave ruins, they left roots, maps not on paper but in memory. Children and change children joined in early. By age 4 they could ride, by 10 herd. By 12 shoot arrows at full gallop. There was no formal school. The land taught them, the family tested them. And their toys, miniature saddles, bows, tents. Play was preparation, or the sky was their roof. The Mongols believed in Tengri, the eternal blue sky. No temples were needed. The open land was sacred enough. They made offerings to fire, whispered prayers to the wind, and thanked the sky for survival. Their faith moved with them, like everything else. The empire that never settled, even the Khan moved. He ruled from tents, met diplomats in portable palaces. His court, though vast, traveled in style. Golden tents, silk rugs, yak hair canopies. Even the capital, Karakoram, was modest. It wasn't the seat of power, just a hub. The real heart of the empire was motion, and wherever the Khan went, the empire was. Even still in motion today, some Mongol families still live this way. They ride, herd, and fold their homes into carts. Their children learn on horseback. Modern life touches them, phones, bikes, power banks, but the rhythm remains. And when they move, they remember. Now breathe with the wind. Let the caravan pass through your mind. Quiet, rhythmic, full of purpose. Up ahead, we'll discover something remarkable. A road across the empire, invisible but essential. Imagine standing alone on an open plain. The sky is wide. The wind brushes softly against your clothes. Then, hooves. A rider appears in the distance, galloping fast. He carries no banner, no escort. Just a satchel and speed. He is part of the Yam, the Mongol communication system. He won't stop, he won't speak. He'll change horses soon and continue. The Mongol Empire did not only conquer, it connected, faster than anyone thought possible. What was the Yam? The Yam was not a road, but a network. A chain of relay stations stretched across thousands of miles, from Korea to Hungary, Siberia to Persia. Every 25-40 kilometers, a station awaited. Inside were fresh horses, hay, food, and warmth. A rider would switch horses there. Sometimes rest, sometimes not. The message kept moving, faster than any rival system in the world. The riders. They were trained, disciplined, and trusted. They faced wild animals, freezing winds, and bandits, but the law protected them. Harming a Yam courier meant execution. They could ride 200 miles in a day. They were quiet, they were swift. They kept the empire alive. These messages and more they carried. Written orders from the Khan. Verbal instructions memorized. Intelligence reports, trade notes, diplomatic gifts. Sometimes the yam even moved people, ambassadors, tax collectors, prisoners, doctors. It was not only fast, it was flexible. And the paisa riders carried a paisa, a tablet granting them authority. With it, they could demand food, shelter, even new horses. Families along the route were required to help. In return, they received respect and protection. The paisa meant this man rides for the empire, help him. His hospitality and law. The yam was possible because of shared duty. Households along routes became part of the system. They fed riders, cared for animals, opened their homes, one without complaint. Genghis Khan made this law early, and it held. The yam was not only state-built, it was society-supported. In speed and surveillance. The system didn't only carry messages, it watched. Riders reported on road conditions, local unrest, unusual sightings, weather ahead. In this way, the yam became the eyes and ears of the empire. A broken bridge in the east might be known in the capital by nightfall. Global praise. European visitors like Marco Polo were astonished. He described the speed, the precision, the quiet power of it all. They had never seen anything like it, and wouldn't again for centuries. With a silent artery. The yam moved without fanfare. No fanfare, no flags. Just dust, sweat, and the steady beat of hooves. At night, a rider might sleep beside his horse, scroll tucked beneath his tunic. No fire, no music, just the wind. By dawn, he rode again. The message still moving. Let that image stay with you. The road not made of stone, but of duty, breath, and the quiet pulse of an empire. From yurts to cities, deserts to mountains, the Mongols built a world connected by speed, trust, and silence. And still it moves through history. Now breathe deeply. Let the gallop fade into stillness. Ahead lies another story, not of roads, but of resilience. Imagine waking to wind tugging at the felt of your tent. The morning air is sharp, but you rise quickly. There are animals to tend, water to fetch, cloth to fold, decisions to make. You are a woman of the Mongol steppe. And your world does not pause, it moves. And more than mothers, Mongol women were not cloistered or silenced. They were essential in every aspect of life. They managed households, tended animals, butchered meat, sewed clothing, gathered dung for fires, and made fermented mare's milk, arak, from spring to autumn. Children were raised not in isolation but among cousins, animals, and warriors. Girls learned to ride almost as soon as boys. By age 10, they could herd and shoot from horseback. An authority in the camp inside the gur, the woman ruled. She arranged the furniture, ran the fire, maintained order. The central hearth belonged to her. The tools, recipes, and rhythm of daily life flowed through her hands. A good tent wife wasn't just industrious, and she was a logistician. She organized seasonal moves, rationed supplies, mended saddles, and coordinated labor. When her husband rode off for war, she did not wait. She led. Marriage, polygamy, and position. Men could have multiple wives, but status mattered. The first wife, and often chosen with care, held the greatest authority. Her tent came first, her sons inherited titles. She received the best dowry and often came from noble blood. Marriage was both personal and political. Alliances were sealed not just with swords, but with brides. And many of those brides became power brokers in their own right, the wives of Khans. The wives of Genghis Khan were not ornaments. They advised, commanded, and ruled in his absence. His chief wife Berta came from a respected clan. She was kidnapped early in their marriage, rescued later, and remained his partner in life and politics. Their sons, born of her, were first in line, but it was her influence that kept their position strong. Other wives, like Yesugan and Yesui, had roles of their own, managing trade routes, acting as regional regents, or overseeing court affairs. The women as regents. When Genghis Khan died, his empire passed to his sons, but it was his daughters-in-law and granddaughters who often ruled the heartlands. One woman, Turagana Khatun, ruled the empire outright for 5 years, selecting governors, collecting tribute, even issuing edicts in her own name. Others led provinces, negotiated peace treaties, or influenced succession. In a world where many cultures silenced women, the Mongols gave them voice and responsibility. And on the battlefield, Mongol women did not form armies, but they trained with bows, rode fast horses, and could defend themselves. If the camp was attacked, they fought. If the herd scattered, they pursued. If the men were gone, they held the line. Stories tell of warrior wives who rode into battle when husbands fell, of mothers teaching sons to shoot with precision, of daughters inheriting skill and strength. They were never passive. Faith and the feminine Mongol spirituality honored balance, sky above, earth below. The earth, like the woman wed, was nurturing, steady, life-giving. They worshipped Edugenike, the Earth Mother. She was not fierce nor distant. She was the ground beneath their hooves, the soil that fed the herd. Even when Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity arrived, women retained their place, not as silent shadows, but as vital voices in the spiritual fold. Invisible, but central Mongol women didn't build monuments, but they held the empire. They brewed, healed, bargained, and advised. They gave birth in gers during snowstorms. They packed carts during sudden migrations. They grieved sons lost to war and taught the next generation how to ride. They left few records, but they left structure. They left continuity, and now let the fire grow low. Feel the calm strength of the tent center. Hear the quiet hands folding leather, pouring tea, checking the herds in fading light. In the next chapter, we'll shift again, from human stories to lost civilizations. Picture a wind-swept valley cradled by soft hills. Not crowded, not loud. Just grass, sky, and silence. But centuries ago, this quiet plain echoed with hammers, hooves, and the shuffle of silk. This was Karakorum, the short-lived, long-forgotten capital of the Mongol Empire. Built at the heart of a mobile empire, it was never meant to dominate the landscape, only to reflect its reach. Why build a city? The Mongols were nomads. They valued movement over permanence, tents over towers, freedom over walls. But as the empire expanded into China, Persia, Russia, and beyond, they needed a place to gather. Karakorum became that place, a symbolic center, not the throne of an emperor, but the meeting point of the world. While its beginnings founded by Genghis Khan around 1220, but truly built up by his son Ogedei Khan. Ogedei ordered workshops, storehouses, and foreign quarters. He invited artisans from all over, Chinese stonemasons, Persian metalworkers, Muslim scribes, Christian carpenters. The result, a city of contrasts, tents beside temples, wood beside felt. The layout Karakorum was not a grand metropolis. It covered a modest area, a few kilometers wide. Its walls were simple but sturdy. Inside, streets were unpaved but orderly. You might walk past a Buddhist stupa, then hear the call to prayer from a mosque, followed by the faint ringing of church bells. Ogedei had allowed every faith to build within his city. This wasn't tolerance, and it was strategy. A multi-ethnic empire needed representation. Karakorum provided it. Or the Khan's palace. Ogedei's palace was more like a giant tent made of stone. Not lofty or gold-covered, but functional. Inside, it held a great hall with silver fountains, sculpted in the shape of lions and serpents. Wine and fermented mare's milk poured from their mouths. At banquets, foreign envoys sat side by side. Persian traders, Russian nobles, Chinese scribes, Indian monks. It wasn't beauty they admired, but power made humble. A ruler who could conquer cities, yet dine in a hall shaped like a tent. Trade and diplomacy. Karakorum became a hub. Silks from China, ivory from India, furs from Siberia, jewels from Baghdad, coins from Europe. The Silk Road split and converged here. Caravans arrived dusty and weary, and left again full of new cargo and imperial orders. Here, diplomatic missions were launched. Here, peace treaties were signed. Here, spies passed messages. Here, maps were drawn and redrawn. A city of guests. But the Mongol elite never stayed long. Karakorum was useful, but it was never home. The true heart of the empire moved, with the herds, with the Khans, with the seasons. Even Ogedei traveled constantly. The palace sat empty more often than not. Karakorum served the state, but never became its soul. Its fall and fade. By the late 13th century, Kublai Khan moved the capital to Beijing, seeking grandeur, control, and deeper influence in China. Karakorum declined, neglected, forgotten. Later it was sacked by invading armies. What wasn't burned was buried. Its stones scattered, its stories silenced. Grass grew over its roads, winds erased its names. And the Mongols returned to what they had always been. Moving, surviving, remembering. Was us today what remains of Karakorum now? A few ruined walls, fragments of temples, Traces of workshops and memory. Archaeologists dig slowly, brushing away dust and time. They find coins, broken ceramics, and bronze ornaments. Not much, but enough. Enough to say this was real. For a moment, the empire paused here. Let that image settle. A capital not of marble, but of movement. No towering statues, no triumphal arches. Just a tent-shaped palace, a silver fountain, and 1,000 roads leading in and back out again. Imagine you're a peasant in 13th century Hungary. The wind has changed. Travelers speak of strange riders seen near the borders. Villages have vanished and not burned, just gone. One night far off, you hear hooves. Not dozens, hundreds. The Mongols have come to Europe. Why they came by 1241, the Mongol Empire stretched from Korea to the Caspian Sea. But they wanted more. They were not only conquerors, they were planners, cartographers, record keepers. And now they turned their gaze toward the west. Europe was fragmented, knights fought one another. Kings distrusted popes, the Mongols saw an opportunity. Under the command of Subutai, one of Genghis Khan's greatest generals, a great western campaign began. By the first battles. They didn't start in Paris or Rome. They began in the wild lands of Eastern Europe. The Mongols entered Poland and Hungary, targeting cities, strongholds, and armies. At the Battle of Legnica, Mongols crushed Polish knights. A bishop died, so did dozens of noble families. In Hungary, at the Battle of Mohi, they faced King Bela IV and destroyed his army in a single day. They used river crossings, fake retreats, encirclement. It was not brute force, it was calculation. Europe had never seen anything like it. Tactics and terror. The Mongols rarely fought fair, they fought smart. They would pretend to flee, then ambush pursuers with hidden forces. They used smoke, noise, signal flags, and horns. Their messengers kept units coordinated across miles of terrain. Cities that resisted were made examples. Those who surrendered were often spared, but the fear spread faster than the riders. In some towns, people fled before the Mongols even arrived. In others, they barricaded themselves inside churches and waited, silently. The Great Withdrawal. Then, suddenly, the Mongols vanished. Europe braced for another wave, but it never came. Why? Because Ogedei Khan, the son of Genghis Khan, had died, and the great princes had to return east to elect a new leader. It was not mercy that saved Europe, it was timing. Had the Mongols pressed westward, history might look very different. Like what they left behind, they didn't stay, but they left traces. Maps redrawn, borders shaken. Diplomats dispatched to the east. Europe began to learn. About the Mongols, their customs, their speed, their laws. Even the Pope sent envoys. He called for an alliance. The Mongols declined. They had their own plans. A Mongol reputation in Europe. For centuries, they were remembered as monsters. Demons on horseback. Whispers in bedtime stories. But some chroniclers saw the truth. They noted the order behind the chaos, the unity, the strategy, the fairness shown to those who complied. The Mongols weren't mindless raiders. They were rulers, just not of Europe. Legacy of fear walls rose higher after their retreat. Armies trained harder, and slowly Europe prepared for a world more connected. Trade would follow the Mongols' trails, so would knowledge and eventually, gunpowder. But it began here, in the silent march of hoofbeats across frost-covered plains. Now breathe slowly, let the tension fade. The Mongols have gone, the villages sleep, and the knights return to their courts changed. Imagine yourself at a quiet campfire. A gray dusk settles on the steppe. You sit cross-legged near a Mongol elder. She speaks not of war, but of law. Not shouted, not written in stone, but passed from mouth to mouth like stories, like truth. This is Yasa, the great law of Genghis Khan. Less a scroll, more a spine. The Yasa, a hidden code. Genghis Khan never carved his laws into marble. No single written version survives, but the Yasa was real. A collection of decrees, decisions, customs, built on loyalty, fairness, and consequence. Its purpose wasn't punishment, it was order. Among warriors, merchants, herders, even conquered peoples, all were subject to its reach. Key principles. Loyalty came first. Betrayal was the deepest crime. A soldier abandoning his post faced death. So did a commander who lied to the Khan. Merit over birth. You didn't have to be noble to rise. You had to be capable, proven trusted. Religious freedom. All beliefs were protected. Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, shamans, all were welcome. The law punished religious persecution, strict honesty. Theft and lying were punished harshly. A merchant who cheated could lose trade rights and or more. Respect for the earth. Wasting water, polluting streams, cutting trees without cause, and all discouraged. The steppe was sacred. Justice was swift. The Mongols did not build courthouses. But they had judges appointed by the Khan or local leaders. Punishments were severe but predictable. You knew what would happen. That was the point. Justice was public but not cruel for cruelty's sake. And sometimes mercy was shown, especially for first offenses or those who confessed. If the roll of oaths words mattered, an oath once made could not be broken. Oaths were made before fire, or under open sky, or in the presence of a superior. Breaking an oath wasn't just dishonor, it was spiritual offense. The Mongols believed that Tengri, the eternal blue sky, heard everything. Belief in the sky. They had no temples, no gods with faces, but they believed in Tengri, the vast sky above. It was eternal, just omniscient. It gave power to those worthy, and removed it when leaders strayed. Genghis Khan believed his conquests were not ambition, but a divine mission. He bowed to the sky before battle. He offered milk to the wind in prayer. He listened for signs in birds, storms, silence. Shamans and spirit shamans acted as guides, healers, prophets, dream readers. They wore cloaks with bells, carried drums, antlers, talismans. They spoke to spirits, sought visions before major decisions, and comforted the dying. They were respected and sometimes feared. Even as Buddhism and Islam spread, shamans remained, a thread to the old ways. Order in all things. The Mongols didn't rely on walls. Their empire stretched across deserts and forests, held together not by chains but by structure. They organized armies in units of 10, clans in ranked circles, taxes in neat records, messages by relay. It looked like chaos from the outside, but from within it pulsed with rhythm. A quiet discipline. A Mongol soldier knew his rank. A merchant knew his route. A herder knew his season. A child knew when to speak and when to listen. The empire was loud in battle, but quiet in expectation. It did not need guards in every camp. It had rules. So now breathe softly. You're no longer near a battlefield, but by a lawgiver's tent. Not writing but remembering. Not fear but structure. Next, we near the twilight of empire, not through conquest, but through division. Imagine the world under one hand. From the cold forests of Russia, to the golden sands of Persia, to the quiet villages of Korea. All once ruled, or feared, the Mongol Empire. But now that hand begins to open, not with thunder, not with flames, but with division. The heirs of Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan died in 1227. He left behind sons, grandsons, generals, all fierce, all loyal, but not all united. He had divided the empire into 4 parts, each ruled by one branch of the family. Together they formed the whole, but over time the bonds stretched thin. Right, 4 Khanates. 1. The Yuan dynasty in China, ruled by Kublai Khan, grand, bureaucratic, and rich in tribute. 2. The Golden Horde in Russia and Eastern Europe, warrior lords who taxed cities and watched from horseback. 3. The Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, a realm of trade, herding, and shifting alliances. Or the Ilkhanate in Persia, sophisticated Islamic and open to Persian customs. Each Khanate claimed the legacy of Genghis, but each followed its own path. One Kublai Khan and the turning point Kublai Khan, Genghis's grandson, that claimed the title of Great Khan. He moved the capital to Beijing, adopted Chinese court customs, wore silk robes, held banquets, built cities. But other Mongol princes saw this as betrayal. To them, the steppe was sacred. Tents, not palaces. Mare's milk, not tea. Some refused to recognize him. Others drifted further from the center. The unity, once held by oaths and fear, began to fray. A conflict between Khanates. The Khanates didn't just disagree. They sometimes fought. Armies clashed over trade routes. Borders blurred. Messages stopped being answered. One Khanate might ally with Persia, another with a Russian prince, another with a Chinese rebellion. The once shared dream of empire turned into parallel ambitions. Agricultural divergence. Each region changed the Mongols. In Persia, Mongol rulers embraced Islam, built madrasas, translated books, and married local nobles. In Russia, they became tribute lords, taxing cities and leaving the Orthodox Church intact. In China, they ruled as emperors, absorbing Confucian norms and adopting dynastic titles. The Mongols didn't vanish, they blended, and as they blended, they separated. There's legacy versus identity. Some Mongol leaders still spoke the old tongue, still rode, hunted, and lived in tents when possible. Others grew distant, writing in Persian or Chinese, living in stone palaces with courtiers and scholars. The thread of unity frayed, and eventually, it snapped. Nice the Great Khan. No more. By the late 1300s, there was no longer a true Great Khan. Only regional rulers, each claiming to carry the flame, but each standing in a different wind. Some still fought under the name of Genghis. Others only remembered him as ancestor, a distant shadow on the steppe. What remained? Even as the empire splintered, its systems lived on. The Yam Courier Network, the census and tax records, the trade routes of the Silk Road, the open borders for travelers and scholars. Europeans, Arabs, Chinese, all wrote of their journeys across Mongol lands, even after those lands no longer reported to the same throne. The empire faded, but the bridges it built remained. Now breathe with the dusk. Imagine the sun setting not on a battlefield, but on a tent city slowly fading from view. The fire burns low. The hooves are fewer now, but in the distance echoes remain. Now imagine yourself alone on the Mongolian steppe. There are no cities in sight, only the whisper of dry grass, the occasional rustle of a distant herd. No banners wave, no horns sound, but something remains, a kind of echo, not of noise but of history. The empire is gone, but not lost. By the 15th century, the Mongol Empire had ceased to exist as a unified power. Khanates fell to rival states. New rulers rose, borders changed, but the Mongols never truly vanished. Their influence settled quietly in the soil, the language, the law, and the map. What they built shaped the world that came after, the roads they cleared. The Silk Road had existed long before the Mongols, but under their rule it thrived. Merchants crossed deserts without bribes. Scholars traveled from China to Persia and back again. Religions moved freely, and peacefully. This open exchange of goods and ideas laid the groundwork for global connection. Later empires would build on it, but the Mongols had shown it was possible. Or a legacy of exchange they brought: Chinese printing to the Middle East, Persian astronomy to East Asia, Muslim medicine to Europe. They translated texts, sponsored scholars, invited craftsmen. Their court was a crossroads of culture. In some ways, they were not builders of cities, but builders of bridges between ideas, people, and traditions. In language and law, the Mongol language faded in many regions, but its echoes remain. Words for trade, war, and governance entered Turkish, Russian, Chinese, and Persian vocabularies. Their legal ideas, swift justice, meritocracy, protection of religious freedom, influenced rulers from Moscow to Delhi. Even centuries later, some Mongol legal customs were cited as models for order in times of chaos. The memory of Genghis Khan. For some, Genghis Khan was a tyrant, for others, a visionary. In Mongolia today, he is revered, not just as a conqueror, but as a nation builder. His face appears on currency. His name is spoken with pride, and across the steppes, memorials stand not in marble, but in open land, where horses still run free. Descendants and names. His bloodline spread far. Some claim descent from him even now, in Central Asia, in Iran, even in South Asia. His name lingers in place names, in family trees, and whispered bedtime tales. Even those who once feared him eventually came to study him and remember. The steppe remains today. The Mongolian steppe is quiet. Nomads still move with the seasons. Yurts are still raised. Irag is still poured. Children still ride before they can read. Modern roads now trace old caravan trails. Tourists walk where Khans once rode. But in the hush between wind and hoof, you can still sense a presence. For his legacy in silence, the Mongols left no pyramids, no Sistine chapels, no hanging gardens, but they left motion. Ideas that traveled, borders that bent, histories that touched. And even now, when we speak of networks, globalization, movement, we follow trails first cleared by riders beneath the blue sky. Bipinal reflection, so breathe deeply. Let the dust settle, let the silence return. You've wandered through yurts and palaces, battles and rituals, storms and seasons. Now the empire is behind you, but its echo, weak, soft, persistent, follows still, in maps and memory, in the wind on the steppe. Thank you for traveling with us tonight. If this story helped you rest, please like and subscribe. And let us know where in the world you're watching from and what time it is. Wherever you are, may your rest be deep and your dreams timeless.